What's happening, y'all? Welcome inside the Fantasy Stock Exchange. Danny and Bush coming at you with Prospect Battles, Episode 6. Today, we have the remaining two top four, big four quarterbacks, whatever you want to call them. We have Zach Wilson versus Trey Lance. And as I've said multiple times, this is a tremendous quarterback class, and we have two very good ones to talk about here.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, again, we mentioned it in the Fields versus Lawrence debate, if you will. Those were the top two consensus amongst the industry. Man, you'll see rankings with either of these guys, quite frankly. One of them in particular has actually been discussed as one around Twitter every now and then, which is wild to think about.
Twitter, too. NFL GMs actually might have Zach Wilson ahead of Trevor Lawrence, which is what you were kind of teasing there. So, yeah. These guys matter. Both of these guys, in my opinion, are not getting out of the top 10 NFL draft picks. So these are guys that should have very, very high draft capital at quarterback, and that's obviously one of the most important things to have at the position. So before we get into the breakdown of these two guys, we're going to hit the intro. All right, so as we do with all positions, we start with analytics. What we're going to start with first is their high school scouting. We have a 2018 three-star quarterback recruit and number 49 dual threat quarterback, according to 24/7 Sports, in Trey Lance. Obviously not a highly decorated guy like Lawrence or Fields. Same goes for Zach Wilson, 2017 three-star recruit, number 38 pro-style quarterback, according to 24/7 Sports. So these guys had to work for what they earned in college.
And it's crazy when you think about it, because last episode we were talking about how Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence were two of the top three graded quarterbacks of all time, according to 24/7 Sports. And then the other two quarterbacks making up the big four, if you will, in this class are three-star recruits. So it's just wild when you think great quarterbacks really have come from really anywhere from high school. As long as you get that opportunity in college, you can make something of yourself, as Trey Lance and Zach Wilson have both exemplified in their collegiate careers. But as you mentioned, again, looking at the full analytical profile, you guys can kind of see the numbers on the screen. I'm assuming they're popped up. And Zach Wilson, 91st percentile or better in every player profile, player profiler showed metric. If you guys can see the college QBR, the college yards per attempt, and the breakout age, all above 91st percentile. And Trey Lance is no slouch in his own right. The only one listed here is the yards per attempt, but that in itself is in the 90th percentile. So when you're talking about analytical profiles, both of them have astonishing profiles compared to really a lot of the quarterbacks we've seen come out in recent memory, to be quite honest.
Yeah, and I actually think Trey Lance's QBR would be better than Zach Wilson's. Unfortunately, it's not listed there because he went to an FBS school, but QBR is calculated basically as a result of like touchdowns, passing yardage, and interceptions. We all know that Trey Lance didn't throw an interception, so I'd imagine his QBR is in the 90-plus percentile if we had that number. But there's a couple parts of analytics. One, we're going to start with their kind of like production profiles. Obviously, both of these guys were highly productive in their breakout seasons. Zach Wilson this past year and Trey Lance 2 years ago. But when you look at the size, we have a bit more of a size discrepancy, in my opinion, than it is listed here. 6'4" versus 6'3" and 226 versus 210. I don't think Zach Wilson is 6'3" and 210. I think he's about 6'1.5", 6'2", 205, 210. I think the weight's probably about accurate. I don't think he's 6'3" personally.
Yeah. I mean, I fully agree. When you watch Zach Wilson, like, don't get me wrong, like he
looks like Baker Mayfield size, which is about 6'1", 205.
And when I watch Trey Lance, in terms of thickness, he looks like Dak Prescott in terms of how thick he is. And Dak Prescott is only 6'2", 235. So if Trey Lance is 6'4", 226, I'll be heavily surprised because, quite frankly, he'd be taller than Dak, but weighing less, even though they look the same when you actually watch the film. I wouldn't be shocked if Trey Lance is closer to 235, 240-ish, and Zach Wilson's closer to around 205, as you mentioned. So the clear size advantage here, in my opinion, is, of course, Trey Lance. But when you do balance it out with the actual just metric listed on the site, I think we can kind of say that their profiles in and of itself, in terms of what they were coming in terms of what they ended up doing in college, I think we can call this a tie.
Yeah, I think we can call it a tie, and I think it would be a decisive advantage for Fields against either of these guys or Lawrence against either of these guys because of the level of competition that these two dudes played.
Yeah.
Obviously, Trey Lance going to an FBS school and Zach Wilson playing at BYU, where he never really played any really good defenses or anything like that. These guys going up against each other in a prospect battle obviously advantages them both, because they would have lost against either of the other two quarterbacks because of that level of competition factor, as well as for Trey Lance's case being only like a 1-year starter, and in Zach Wilson's case only being a 1-year wonder, where he was only really good for 1 year. So that's kind of how we see it as an analytics matchup. We do think it's pretty close. It's pretty much a tie. I would say obviously Trey Lance has the advantage in size, Zach Wilson a slight advantage in level of competition. Production-wise, they're pretty much the same. Zach Wilson has more career passing production. He's been a starter longer, but you have the medical concern of having the shoulder injury that Trey Lance obviously doesn't have. So it's a tie kind of all the way around. These of their concerns as quarterbacks, the analytics are probably their biggest concerns because of the factors that I just mentioned. So after the analytics, let's get into the actual tangible things that they bring to the table as quarterbacks. And we're going to start with accuracy. Accuracy all over the field. I'll start with Zach Wilson, 72.7%.
Ridiculous
completion percentage and 80.3% adjusted completion percentage. And I think the really impressive thing about those numbers is that he didn't go to Oregon. He wasn't Justin Herbert, where he threw swing passes and dump offs like Mac Jones, for example, in this class. He pushed the ball downfield. He created plays outside of structure, and he threw a lot of intermediate plays as well. He wasn't a guy that was just padding his stats with a bunch of checkdowns, which is why his accuracy kind of shows. You're going to see it throughout all these traits. Zach Wilson's just a tremendously accurate quarterback.
Yeah, 100%. Again, you mentioned the fact that his completion and adjusted completion percentages are just ridiculous. And as we'll get through with the efficiency, that is absolutely not just because he was throwing little 4-yard dump offs and guys were getting yards after catch. No, he was pushing the ball down the field, as we'll highlight. Anyways, let's get into Trey Lance. He's an extremely accurate quarterback for the most part and in and of his own right. 66.7% completion percentage with a 72% adjusted completion percentage. And I mean, for the most part, Lance really fits the bill of many of the other quarterbacks in this class, in my opinion. I mean, his highs are just an absolute marvel to watch when you put on the film. I mean, the sheer placement of his throws, the velocity he can generate, he can thread needles with ease, deliver the balls in the breadbasket. I mean, there's really nothing from an accuracy standpoint that he's limited at or can't do. It's just at times, as we'll get into with the deep ball a little more, he was pretty inconsistent. I mean, I wanted to absolutely love every single throw that he made, but
there's just a couple for sure. And that's a concern I've heard like big scouts make too. Like Daniel Jeremiah talked about Trey Lance and he said, Justin Fields isn't going to short hop some things like Trey Lance will, but the highs are just spectacular for Trey Lance. Yeah. And I think that also applies to Justin Fields as well. All these quarterbacks in this class, as you mentioned, kind of have, I would say, high ceiling and lower floors than some of the QB prospects we've seen over the last couple of years. Yeah. But Trey Lance's highs from an accuracy perspective are very, very good.
They're fun to watch. I mean, don't get me wrong. When he wants to be, when he's on this game, he can step into the NFL and be an extremely accurate thrower of the football. But he's going up against Zach Wilson. Zach Wilson is the most accurate overall quarterback in this class, as both the numbers and the film will suggest. So although I really like Lance and what he brings to the table in this regard, I mean, we're giving the edge to Zach Wilson. The accuracy part is all Zach Wilson. That is the bread and butter of Zach Wilson's game, is just his incredible placement on his passes. But you could touch up a little bit more on it before we head into the next category if you want.
Yeah, and if you watch some of Wilson's balls too, especially down the field, his receivers didn't do him a whole lot of favors. No. Like he had passes where a corner would be having their back face to Zach Wilson, and he'd throw the ball like if his receiver could make a one-handed catch, it's that guy's ball all day. Except he played at BYU. He didn't really, like Matt Bushman, the tight end that they had, and there's like a receiver, Dax Milne. Yeah, those are the only two guys that might get drafted. Like the rest of the guys on his team were going to be working at Walmart in a couple weeks. So
they also have that receiver, what's his name, like Powell or something like that, who flashed
he had some solid guys, but
nothing.
Too. Neither of these guys had great receivers, but I mean, Trevor Lawrence throwing to T. Higgins, Justin Ross, and Amari Rodgers. Like, it's not even really close when you compare the the teammates that Trevor Lawrence was playing with and Justin Fields with Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson and stuff, when you compare them to Zach Wilson. Because obviously, as a quarterback, you can't make the guy catch the ball. All you can do is throw it to a point where only he can get it. And Zach Wilson does that to a T. So we're going to give the advantage to Wilson here because and you mentioned it too, he'd have the advantage against Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields in our opinions as well. He's the most accurate quarterback in this class, down the field, intermediate, whatever you want to call it. And now let's talk about arm talent.
Yeah, this is
as again, broken record. All these guys, these top 4 dudes in this class have tremendous arm talent. I would describe Zach Wilson's arm talent as more of a schoolyard quarterback, kind of, and don't freak out when I say this. It's kind of like Patrick Mahomes, where he can do things with his arm and he tries to do things with his arm that you teach quarterbacks not to do, like throw across your body and short hop throws and like throw off platform off your back foot and stuff. And Zach Wilson can get away with it. Can he get away with it just at BYU, or can he get away with it in the NFL? It's going to take some coaching, some limit testing on his part in the NFL to see if he can get away with it, but I believe he can. I think he has the velocity, the off-platform ability of anyone in the NFL currently, and it's going to inspire my comparison for him, and I'll talk about it in a bit, but he reminds me a lot of Kyler Murray from this perspective.
Again, I see that as well. You mentioned there's more of like a schoolyard aspect to what Zach Wilson does. Trey Lance is more so that prototypical, just absolute fucking beast, if you will, when it comes to his arm talent. I mean, he's got the game that fits his associated frame. No mean to pun there, but anyways, when he's got every bit of the zip that you would expect from, again, a 6'4", 225-pound monster. I mean, you got his ability to absolutely stretch the field with his slings. He can deliver absolute bullets in the short and intermediate game. And man, the amount of velocity that he can push when delivering the ball to the opposite hash is just something to marvel at. I mean, multiple times on film, you see he's on the left hash. He's got a receiver running a fucking deep out on the right hash, and he's delivering that ball to the exact spot right on time with just absolute fucking quickness to the throw. I mean, it's a marvel to watch. This guy's got a fucking howitzer. And although I agree, Zach Wilson's got a very talented arm, Trey Lance may have the most talented overall arm in the class, maybe outside of Trevor Lawrence, in my opinion. Like it's
so hard to pick between these 4 guys for who has the best arm. They all bring something different to the table.
Crazy.
If we're talking about arm strength, Lance is right up there with Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields. I think Justin Fields personally has the strongest arm in this class from a velocity perspective, but I actually think Trey Lance and Trevor Lawrence is an argument for arm strength. So that is like really telling. And obviously Zach Wilson would come in 4th in that race, but Zach Wilson's arm is still better than like
Mac Jones.
Yeah, a lot better than Mac Jones. So like
Trask,
better than 24 of the starting quarterbacks in the NFL currently. Like that's just how good these guys are in this class, these top 4 dudes. So we're going to give the advantage to Trey Lance here, but that's no slight against Zach Wilson. I think they kind of just bring a little bit different things to the table. And what you've seen out of Trey Lance's arm is more easily translatable. Zach Wilson's more so maybe something you have to coach around or teach him how to know when to use his off-platform stuff so he doesn't get into too much trouble. So to the next thing that we have here, we have efficiency. And as we talked about, it's a very broad term, but basically what it is describing quarterback play that results in moving an offense, scoring points, collecting first downs, taking care of the ball, not turning the ball over. All of those things go into efficiency. And from an efficiency perspective, these were the 2 best in the class, ahead of Lawrence and Fields. Both of Lawrence and Fields had some struggles with turnovers at time, had some bad decisions that they made. These guys, for the most part, they had a combined 3 interceptions, and all 3 of those were Zach Wilson. Over the last 2 seasons. So Zach Wilson, his yards per attempt number is 11.0, which is incredible for how accurate of his numbers are. As you mentioned, he's not just throwing checkdowns. QBR was 136.3, which is 2nd in the class. 32-3 interception ratio, which is absolutely asinine, and only 11 sacks taken for a guy that is someone that would hold on to the ball a little too long. You figure he might take a little bit more sacks than some people. He's very elusive. He can escape the pocket. He gets first down. He just gets things done, honestly. Like if you guys watch the Coastal Carolina game, you're going to hear that he didn't win that game against Coastal Carolina, but on that last drive, Zach Wilson led a 95-yard drive with no timeouts in 30 seconds on a play that started with a 2nd and 19. So
actually rewatched that game today.
Within an inch of scoring. Like if you guys remember the 1999 Super Bowl where Mike Jones tackles Kevin Dyson short of the goal line when he's trying to reach for the goal line, it was like that type of situation. But Zach Wilson did everything he could. Like he threw a 30-yard bomb downfield to the sideline because he had no timeouts on a freaking rope that got to the sideline and got his guy out of bounds. Like that drive, I would encourage you to watch that drive if you have any questions about Zach Wilson's ability to win games and will his team to win.
Yeah, and that's like, first of all, these people that are using the term QB wins, it's just asinine in my opinion. Because again, there's so much context that goes into the game of football. And just attributing a win to the play of one player is ridiculous. Because I mean, we can both agree that Deshaun Watson is one of the top tier quarterbacks in the NFL. How many games did his team win last year?
They would have a top 5 pick if they still had their first.
They would have had the 3rd overall pick. Yes, 4-12. And was that any part of Deshaun Watson's play?
Deshaun Watson played like an MVP candidate,
right? So, I mean, people that use quarterback wins as the basis of the argument, like fucking Colin Cowherd's like, oh, Dak Prescott 6. No. Okay, I'm not going to get into Dak Prescott right now. But either way, people are going to do the same thing on Zach Wilson. He lost to Coastal Carolina. He's no. Okay, he drove 95 yards on the field.
Hear someone say that, unsubscribe, unfollow, like they don't know what they're talking about. Because like that is the dumbest thing to hold against the quarterback is 1, quarterback wins in general, and 2, that game specifically, because if they watch the game, they would know that you shouldn't be holding that against Zach Wilson. Despite him having a bit of a down first half, like he turned it around and nearly won that game.
And that's so stupid as well, because again, he had 3 total interceptions on the season. One of them was literally with 0 seconds left at the end of the first half, just chucking a Hail Mary to the goal line. And people are going to be like, oh, he only had like 2 touchdowns and 1 pick in that game. He's not that good. He did that against Coastal Carolina. It's like, no. Okay. Anyways, going to quickly mention real quick. 2nd and 19, backed up, delivers a dot to the right hash, delivers them down the field. No questions asked whatsoever about Zach Wilson's efficiency. Let's get into Trey Lance real quick before this video goes on for an hour. Yards per attempt, 9.7, which is 3rd in the class. 130.4 quarterback rating, a 28-0 touchdown to interception ratio. And for a guy as mobile and as talented and as real, I don't want to say Superman-ish, but that's kind of what all these quarterbacks are in this class. He only took 14 sacks as well. And as shown, Lance's 2019 season is just easily one of the most efficient.
And the one game he played this year, he wiped the floor with the opponent that he played. I don't even remember who he played this year. I can't remember who it was, but what did he have, like 5 touchdowns in that game, like 100 rushing yards?
Let me just check real quick.
But he only played 1 game this year is basically the point. And before anyone's like, oh, 28-0, yeah, he played in FBS. It's like, well, I'd rather see you, if you're going to play in FBS, put up numbers. Like Carson Wentz at North Dakota State did not have a season like that. And he was a 2nd overall pick. So the fact that Trey Lance was able to put up that high of a QBR, that high of a yards per attempt, 28 passing touchdowns. I think he had 16 rushing touchdowns on top of that too. Yeah. Just absolutely bonkers numbers. And that's going to get him drafted highly. Like this dude is not getting out of the top 10. If San Francisco fans are listening, Chicago fans or Patriot fans, you ain't getting him at your pick. Like he's not going to make it there.
Yeah, for sure. Again, briefly mentioning that 1 game he played this year. From the passing standpoint, wasn't his greatest outing. 15 for 30, 2 touchdowns and a pick. But what he contributed in the ground game, as we're going to mention soon, 15 for 143 and 2 touchdowns. Yeah, anyways, exactly. Let's get back into the efficiency. I mean, from an overall number standpoint, TD to INT ratio, quarterback rating, ability to avoid sacks for the most part. I mean, he has the claim to be the 2nd most efficient quarterback in the class, given the compared circumstances.
Especially when you add in his ability to pick up first downs and score with his legs too.
However, I mean, we mentioned it already. Wilson is number 1 in terms of the most efficient in this class. So it sucks for Trey Lance because if he faced anybody else in the stat, he would have taken it. But because he's facing Zach Wilson, we got to give the edge here to Zach Wilson. I believe that levels the score at 2-2. No. Okay, it's 2-1-1 for those keeping at home for Zach Wilson. But with that being said, let's get into the next area of comparison. That's gonna be mobility, and I kind of prefaced it when I talked about Trey Lance's 1 game this year. But let's just look over his overall 2019 season: 1,150 rushing yards, 14 rushing touchdowns at 6.9 yards per carry in the 16 games he played. For comparison, that would be, in the NFL, the 2nd best rushing season of all time. Let's just say. So, I mean, this is where Lance's fantasy potential is at. I mean, we've already mentioned the absolute howitzer he's got attached to that right arm. Now let's talk about his legs. I mean, he's got wheels, he's got physicality, and he is the type of quarterback that an offensive coordinator is going to feature as a designed runner in the NFL offense right away. Man, if this guy is picked number 4 by the Atlanta Falcons and Arthur Smith is able to get his hands on him, watch out. Yeah. Watch out.
Yeah, and I know this coaching staff wasn't there in San Francisco, but the way they could use him in San Francisco if Trey Lance were to go there is Colin Kaepernick like. Like that would be the way that they would use him. Obviously, again, not the same coaching staff that coached Kaepernick, but that's kind of if you want to picture something for Trey Lance, like that's not a bad comparison. I've never heard anyone compare him to Kaepernick, but I think that's a pretty decent one. Trey Lance is a dual threat quarterback. Zach Wilson, 353 rushing yards, 10 rushing touchdowns, so a lot of rushing production in the end zone at 5.3 yards per carry in 12 games played. So we've talked about Baker Mayfield. We talked about Kyler Murray. I think his mobility falls in between those guys because Kyler Murray is like one of the most mobile quarterbacks in the NFL. He's not at that level, but Baker Mayfield is a little bit more immobile than Zach Wilson. I would put him closer to Baker Mayfield, but between those two Oklahoma passers.
Another one I kind of like in terms of mobility is a little bit of Drew Lock. That's kind of where I have it.
Like even Ryan Tannehill, like in terms of mobility.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Daniel Jones, even.
With that being said, though, I mean, when we're talking about Trey Lance, we're talking about like the Dak Prescott's, Cam Newton type rushers of the world, and compared to the guys we mentioned with Wilson, you guys can see Lance is taking this. So leveling the score 2-2-1, but we got two more categories to go, and when you hear what they are, you'll kind of have an idea of where this comparison is going to end up going in terms of direction. Let's talk about their deep passing, and you can take it away with your boy Zach Wilson, but just absolutely absurd deep passing numbers.
This is the calling card right here.
Absurd.
So we talked about last video on Tuesday. We talked about Jaylen Waddle being like athleticism god of the class. This is Zach Wilson's calling card. Deep passing. We talked about his accuracy from any perspective, but his deep passing stats are ridiculous. Again, as we mentioned, for a guy that played at BYU with Dax Milne and Matt Bushman, who opted out of this season as his weapons, 16.6% of his total passes were 20-plus yards. So he's pushing the ball downfield. Adjusted deep completion percentage of 67.9, which is if his adjusted deep completion percentage, not on deep passes, just in general, was 67.9, that's a good number. So let alone that this is on passes of 20-plus yards, absolutely ridiculous. 131 passer rating on deep throws. All the people that I trust for quarterback evaluations, the Todd McShays, the Daniel Jeremiahs, the Mel Kipers, the first thing they'll bring up about Zach Wilson is this guy's deep ball is the best in the class. This guy is a tremendous deep ball. His deep accuracy is out of this world. Like, this is what he does. And again, as fantasy players, we know that deep bombs score us fantasy points. So this is a stat that directly translates to fantasy points, because I can't tell you how many times as a Jameis Winston fantasy owner, as a Buccaneers fan, I saw Jameis Winston miss deep balls to Deshaun Jackson and Mike Evans. So if you're accurate with your deep passing, it makes your receivers better, one. So if he goes to a team that has a good deep threat, like Carolina, for example, that it increases Robbie Anderson, DJ Moore's value, because you know he has the deep accuracy to get him the ball downfield.
For sure. I mean, we're mentioning the overall deep completion percentage, 67.9%. For reference, Trevor Lawrence's overall completion percentage was 67.9. So, I mean, it just goes to show, again, I know that's obviously the adjusted amount, but man, like, it just goes to show how freaking ridiculous Zach Wilson is at getting these balls down the field, at giving his receivers really a chance to make a play on any type of ball thrown their way. Trey Lance's stats on this regard, for whatever reason, are not available, but I'll tell you from a film perspective, he's very similar to what I saw from Justin Fields in that when he is on his game, he has a claim for arguably second best in this class, but his general inconsistencies in terms of the placement at times in deep portions of the field was really evident when I plugged on the film. Again, you're going to see a guy who, against, I think it was Central Arkansas, at times had guys wide open down the field and just couldn't put the ball on the money. And yes, when he's on, he's fantastic in this regard. It's just there's too many instances on film of him missing these balls for me to really even put him in a category close to Zach Wilson, because Zach Wilson does not have those inconsistencies.
I think he's the worst deep ball passer of the top four. Trey Lance.
I agree.
I think that's probably the area that he needs to improve at.
Maybe better than Lawrence. But
yeah, when you're comparing between these two guys, it's no contest. Like for reference, Zach Wilson's deep completion percentage adjusted is 67.9, as I mentioned. Trevor Lawrence's is 51%.
Yep. Yeah.
And Justin Fields is 59.4. So like Justin Fields is still 8% below Zach Wilson adjusted deep completion percentage. And again, remember that Justin Fields was throwing to Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson. Zach Wilson was not throwing to these guys. So again, can't emphasize this enough. This is Zach Wilson's calling card. This is what's going to get him drafted very highly in the NFL. And this is a Russell Wilson-esque deep passer, like that good of a deep passer. So keep that in mind. You think of when you think of Zach Wilson, don't like certain quarterbacks will struggle with things at the next level. Some guys struggle with turnovers. Some guys struggle with deep accuracy. Some guys struggle with pocket presence. Like what Zach Wilson does best is the hardest things for people to learn at the next level, which is really, really encouraging for his potential to be very good very early in his career.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's in the name, right? You mentioned comparing his deep ball to Russell Wilson. It just runs in the Wilson name, right?
Yeah, literally.
But anyways, let's get into the final category of comparison. That's going to be their ability under pressure. When the guy's in their face, can they still stay composed? Can they still make the plays? Comparing the stats, Trey Lance, 50% adjusted completion percentage while under pressure, 117 passer rating when under pressure, and a 6-0 touchdown interception ratio. In comparison to Zach Wilson, 61.5% adjusted completion percentage, 98.5 straight under pressure, and a 5-1 touchdown interception ratio. I'll let you start off. What did you notice about Zach Wilson when he was under pressure at BYU?
Yeah, so Zach Wilson under pressure is the way Zach Wilson plays. As I mentioned, I used the term schoolyard already. He tries to get out of the pocket a little too early. And some people can see that as a knock on him. Some people might just attribute it to his play style. I attribute it to his play style because we've seen from guys like Deshaun Watson, when you have happy feet, when you're actually a good athlete like Zach Wilson is, you can evade the pocket early and try and make something happen on the run or outside of structure. And I'm not going to penalize you for it. But when Zach Wilson did sit in the pocket, his adjusted completion percentage under pressure was 61.5%, which is a very good number for a pressure rating, especially for a guy, again, playing at BYU. His offensive line wasn't very good. And then a 98.5 passer rating under pressure, which is amongst the better ones in the class, to be honest. And it's like, for reference, Justin Fields is like 50 points lower than that. And Trevor Lawrence is like 30 points lower than that, or 20 points. So it's significantly better than both of those guys, which is encouraging to see. And a 5-1 touchdown to interception ratio, also encouraging to see. So under pressure, Zach Wilson knows how to handle it. He will try and escape the pocket, but again, that's all kind of part of his play style and his pocket presence. Sometimes he steps up when he needs to. Sometimes he'll just get out of there and try and make some things happen down the field. He's a scrambler. That's the type of quarterback he is.
And I'm curious, was that one interception, would that have been on the Hail Mary at the end of the half?
It might have been. I'm not exactly sure.
I mean, it's got a 1 out of 3 chance of being.
Yeah.
But when we're talking about Trey Lance in this regard, and I feel like the adjusted completion percentage under pressure of being 50% is more indicative of how he is under pressure than the passer rating. Because the 117, when I saw it, based off what I watched on film, it didn't really match up. But then again, when you take into account he wasn't necessarily throwing interceptions when it was coming to the situation, I guess it makes more sense. But when I saw Trey Lance under pressure at times, it did seem like he would kind of panic. It did seem like he would kind of rush his throws. I mentioned the inconsistencies down the field. A lot of that was attributed to when he had a defender in his face. He would have guys, again, mentioning the Central Arkansas game alone, he would have guys open down the field that really he just needs to put it anywhere in the vicinity and it's going to be a walk-in touchdown. And because there's pressure in his face, he just overthrows them by 4 or 5 yards. And you just don't see that type of stuff with Wilson. So although the passer rating is substantially higher and the touchdown interception ratio is better, again, that 50.0 adjusted completion percentage makes so much more sense when I attribute it to what I actually saw from him on film, giving it context. So overall, although the numbers in general would point to Trey Lance being better under pressure, I actually thought Zach Wilson was a much better player when pressure was in his face. What are your thoughts in terms of Trey Lance, in terms of what those numbers really indicate in your own perspective?
I agree, and we talked about it for Justin Fields. So he has moments, again, where he'll evade a defender, take a big hit, and deliver a deep ball downfield or just a ball in general under pressure. And he'll have moments where he kind of panics in the pocket, or he might take a bad sack, or whatever the case is. He might. Trey Lance actually, he didn't have any interceptions, but he did have a couple fumbles that don't count, obviously, as interceptions. So that's pressure's a very common thing for a young quarterback to struggle with. So I don't think he has any problems. Obviously, for a guy like Trey Lance and a guy like Justin Fields, who of the 4 quarterbacks at the top are the 2 worst at handling pressure, whereas Trevor Lawrence and Zach Wilson are the 2 best at handling pressure, I would say it matters more for those 2 guys that are bad at handling pressure to go to a team with a better offensive line, for example. So that's kind of the way you want to think about it. But the final tally of the scores, we got 4-2-1 in favor of Zach Wilson. We talked about Justin Fields versus Trevor Lawrence. I mean, if we were the consensus around the industry might be Justin Fields versus Trevor Lawrence for fantasy, but the consensus around the draft community is Trevor Lawrence versus Zach Wilson as the top two quarterbacks, because a lot of people have Wilson ranked ahead of Trevor Lawrence, and a lot of people are under the assumption that the Jets are going to take Zach Wilson at 2.
If he's there too, yeah. There's
Zach
actually a
Wilson's
report.
Only my quarterback 2, and Trey Lance is my quarterback 3, and Justin Fields is my quarterback 4. I like all I like every one of these 4 guys, but Wilson is the guy I have just behind Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, again, I was going to mention, as we're recording this today, it was actually released that so when Joe Douglas was originally asked during the 2020 season about the status of Sam Darnold, he basically said he was untouchable. He got re-asked yesterday and basically said, "Oh yeah, I'll field calls if they come." So I mean, if that's not indicative of their potential plan this offseason, I don't know what else would be. And I've been saying it, I've been preaching it from the rooftops for multiple times now. Getting that young quarterback at number 2 that you can have for 5 years of team control and see if he's the answer is so much more valuable, in my opinion, than the 2 years maximum left that you have of Sam Darnold.
And Wilson, to me, is a little similar to Sam Darnold. They kind of offer the same type of things outside of structure. The only thing is that Wilson didn't struggle with turnovers the way that Sam Darnold did at USC. Yeah. So if anything, he might even be a better prospect from that perspective. I think Darnold had like a bit of a better arm, and he had more experience.
I didn't like Darnold.
Huh?
I didn't even like Darnold coming out of the draft.
I did. I really liked Sam Darnold that year. But I think the level of competition difference and all that stuff that Sam Darnold had in his favor, he was really productive when he was a lot younger too. Very productive most of his college career. But yeah, Zach Wilson, the Jets, makes a lot of sense. The San Francisco scheme that they're probably going to be running with Mike LaFleur there. Yeah, you guys know who we prefer. We prefer Zach Wilson. Both of us, I believe, prefer Zach Wilson.
Yep. QB3 versus QB4 as of now. I
mentioned comparisons. Both of our comparisons came up for these two guys. I compared Zach Wilson to Kyler Murray. You compared Trey Lance to Dak Prescott. Those in my player cards in our draft guide are actually the 2 comparisons I have listed for these 2 players. So I really like both of those comparisons, and I think those 2 guys are 2 of the best 5 quarterbacks in fantasy right now. And if that doesn't tell you anything about this QB class, that this is our QB 2 and 3, and Justin Fields we had compared to Cam Newton, this class is that good.
And I still think, honestly, again, if Trey Lance, like Dak Prescott, works on the consistencies in the deep ball, because Dak Prescott in his rookie and second year was basically similar to what we've seen from Trey Lance as a prospect. He's kind of inconsistent in the deep portions of the field, struggled a little bit under pressure when it came to that. But man, if Trey Lance takes that Dak Prescott type stat, becomes more comfortable in the pocket, becomes more comfortable hitting the deep portions of the field at a more consistent basis, the sky's the limit for Trey Lance. And I think he's got
honestly,
more.
Too, with Trey Lance, he has the athletic ability that if he's facing heavy pressure, just run, man. Just run. Don't even worry about throwing the ball.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I fully agree. Again, I think this quarterback class is so fun, and I cannot wait to see what these landing spots are.
It's going to be a big letdown next year. That's how good this class is. We're going to be like, I wouldn't be surprised, honestly, if 3 or 4 of these guys, or 2 or 3 of these guys, were top 12 quarterbacks in fantasy this season. I wouldn't be surprised if that happened, because they have the rushing ability, they have the arm talent, like all the things that you want to see out of a quarterback, the Konami code, they all have it. So with that being said, guys, we are going to head out of here. If you guys enjoyed this video, please like it. Helps us out tremendously. Comment anything down below that will help us in the YouTube algorithm. Comment algorithm, just like Karakamon, if you made it to this point.
The classic.
In the video, subscribe to the channel if you are new. Make sure to check out our description. Our draft guide will be officially live as of today. We might have a separate video announcing that. So stay tuned for that and all that good stuff. Make sure you're following both of us on our socials. Join the Discord, all that good stuff. Danny, you have anything else to say before we get out of here?
With that being said, hope you all enjoyed. And as always, click that subscribe button if you haven't already. Helps us a lot.
Why you need the money?